This video, I'm going to talk about why your hamstrings always feel tight no matter how much you stretch them. Very common problem. Pretty much everybody that's come to me at one point or another has complained about tightness in their hamstrings. And they're often confused when I tell them that their hamstrings may not be tight because they're too short. They could be feeling tight because they're actually chronically overstretched. Now, this is kind of our body's fault because it's sending the signal to us that we perceive as tension and tightness, and we think that is because the muscle is short. So that would make logical sense, right? If a muscle is very short, it must be very tight. But it's very, at least when it comes to hamstrings, counterintuitively, the hamstrings feel tight because they're chronically being lengthened and stretched, and that's because of the position of the pelvis. And I'm going to use my favorite anatomy app right here, Complete Anatomy, to show you what a pelvis looks like. So a pelvis, this bony structure right here, that is the front of the pelvis. This is the back of the pelvis. And you can see this is your upper leg bone. Now, if you don't know, the hamstrings, there's different ones, but they approximately attach to this bone right there. And they go all the way down the back of the leg, and they attach to the back of the knee in different angles. Now, what happens is the pelvis, again, this is the front, the pelvis will actually often be tilted forward and down in the front, which will pull this attachment of the hamstring up and back. So since your knee isn't coming up with it, it's going to pull and lengthen that hamstring because it attaches to the back of the pelvis and the back of the knee. So again, if that pelvis tilts forward in the front, this part is going to come up. So it's stretching that hamstring. You feel that when you're standing, or maybe when you're moving, feels like that hamstring is about to tear, and it feels like that because it really is in that position, kind of almost going to tear. So people perceive that tightness and they stretch it because they think, well, if it's tight, I must need to lengthen it and stretch it. So people stretch it for years, literally. They'll stretch their hamstrings for years, and they'll finally come to me and they'll be like, my hamstrings just always feel tight. I've had tight hamstrings my entire life, and I stretch and it never seems to work. And so I tell them, well, we need to try something different. Maybe we actually need to strengthen those hamstrings and actually shorten them. Usually they'll give me this funny look like, I've never heard that before. That doesn't make any sense. I think I just wasted my money on you. But go with me. If you've done something for years and it's never worked, maybe it's time to try the opposite approach. And I can tell you this has been borne out by science. This is something the Postural Restoration Institute talks about all the time. Muscles really kind of only do what they're allowed to do by way of where they're attached on the skeleton, on the joints. Now, if your pelvis is tilted forward, it's going to stretch that hamstring all the time. So that hamstring doesn't want to be stretched anymore. It wants to be brought back into a more comfortable state, which actually would include shortening it. So since you can't make the knee come higher, you're going to have to tilt the pelvis back so that this hamstring attachment can actually have a little bit more space and like looseness to it. Now, how you do that, there's a whole, I'll probably have to make another video about that because this is a complicated, not really complicated, but it's kind of an easy fix, but it's a complicated explanation. And I don't want to go too deep into the anatomy, but I just want you to understand that if you're one of these people that complains about how tight your hamstrings feel, no matter how much you stretch, you're probably in this bracket of people that actually have a pelvis that's tipped forward that's chronically stretching the hamstring. So we need to do the opposite of that to make those hamstrings feel better. And that's all I'm going to talk about in this video. I think I'll maybe talk about solutions in next videos. But yeah, if you got questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll answer them for you. All right, see you in the next video.